Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GMCCI Advocacy Podcast. Meet the candidates. My name is Tony Loconsole with Muscatine Power and Water, and you are watching this potentially on MPW TV's channels 5 and 9, or YouTube, or social media. And we're glad that you're here. Today, I am honored to be joined by Kerry Dalbey, who is a candidate for Muscatine Community School District Board of Education. Kerry, we're going to have you start with a little introduction of yourself, some background, connection to the school district, and then what motivated you to run for the Board of Education. And it's good to see you, and thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So a little bit about myself. I have lived in Muscatine, forever. Educationally, I've been involved in public education for 15 plus years. So I kind of got my start in the early childhood world back whenever the state of Iowa started statewide voluntary preschool. I stayed home for a little while we did foster care. Was a PS MAP trainer, the course to kind of become certified as a foster adoptive parent. I served as a court-appointed special advocate. Then whenever our boys that we adopted were in school, I said, I think I'm ready to head back to the classroom. So I was offered a position at Colorado. I taught there until the school closed, and kind of, a lot of our staff and students rolled over to Madison, and I joined them there as a teaching and learning coach. So that was a new role, really exciting to be, a part of that cohesive team that helped our families transition. From there, I also served as a teaching and learning coach at McKinley Elementary and then at Muscatine High School. So that was kind of my time, in the K-12 world. I currently work at MCC. I serve as the coordinator for disability services, tutoring and testing there. So that's a little bit about, kind of my history with public education. I'm a mom. I've got, all of my kids have gone through school in Muscatine. My youngest is a senior this year. So
Wow.
I know that's kind of crazy to think that, that we're already at that point. So yeah, a little bit about how I sort of got to this point, where I said, I think I'd like to throw my hat in for a school board.
Sure.
I've always been really passionate about public education. I feel like it's a non-negotiable. It's kind of, in my opinion, it's almost a promise that we extend to every family and every child. And I think that, it's sort of unique that education is one of the only industries that, a board of directors isn't made up of individuals typically who, have a lot of experience working in that field, or, maybe they've retired and, they've kind of, they are maybe a little bit removed from it. And so I thought, I kind of have experience pre-K 12 at the college level. Like maybe it's a good opportunity for me to kind of, offer up my my expertise and my time, doing the work. So yeah, I'm super excited, to even have this opportunity to be having these conversations.
Yeah, well, we're glad you're here. We have, as I've been saying, we have 10 questions that all candidates have received ahead of time, and we're going to work through these. And the goal is to inform the viewers so that whether you're voting ahead of Election Day, which in Muscatine and everywhere else, I believe, November 4th, you can feel informed and make good decisions when you vote. I'm old-fashioned. I like to vote in person on Election Day, so that's just me, but whatever is comfortable for those watching, so be it. So we'll start off with our first question, Kerry. What do you see as the most critical challenge facing Muscatine schools, and how would you address it if you find yourself elected to the Board of Education?
Yeah, so I think our first big obstacle is our declining enrollment. And, I think that as a community, we've kind of been talking about this for 10 plus years. That's kind of based, it's not kind of, it is significantly based on birth rates and things like that. So I think declining enrollment is going to be the probably the most pressing obstacle that the board is going to be trying to navigate in the coming years. I would say additionally, staff and teacher morale. I feel like those two are pretty intimately connected. Whenever you have declining enrollment, you have declining funding, which often means you have to make decisions, that impact students directly. And I don't think anybody goes into education because they are looking to get rich quick, obviously. They're typically there because they want to do the best that they can to serve their students. And so I think those two, are going to be really tightly intertwined. And I see those kind of as our biggest challenges.
Yeah, that's good. Second question, how will you ensure, and you touched on this a little bit, all students, regardless of background, have access to quality education in Muscatine?
Yeah, this is something that I am very passionate about, just ensuring that we do have space for every learner at the table. We're thinking about the diverse needs of all of our students. And I think one of the most impactful ways that we can do that is by staying centered on our district goals, making sure that those district goals are really centered around they're data driven. They are based in evidence-based best practices. And so using that data and those goals to sort of drive our decision making. Every learner is different. So ensuring that we have MTSS supports in place. MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a lot of acronyms just in
there
general,
are.
but education, there seems to be a lot as well.
Yes.
So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, of course. And so MTSS really just kind of gets at the heart of, we can provide universal instruction for all of our learners. And we know that, for the vast majority of students, that's going to be sufficient. That will meet their needs. Then, we've got a smaller group of students that are really going to need some targeted supports. And then we have, kind of that really small group that's going to require some really intensive support. So I think keeping those things in mind as we go forward and make decisions is how we can really make things accessible for all of our students. So.
That's good. Next one speaks to the staff. So what is your approach to supporting teachers and staff in the district?
Yeah, so I love this question because I think, I've been that teacher that's been, on the receiving end of that support, and I've been the one, the teaching and learning coach that's been providing that support. And so I think one of the most impactful things that we can do is sort of take the system that we use whenever we work with our students and apply those same principles whenever we're working to support our staff, our educators and teachers. And I think ensuring that, not only do we have high expectations, but we have consistent expectations. And, we're providing support to ensure that our teachers and staff can get there. I think that those are some of the most impactful things that we can do. I think it's really also important whenever educators get the opportunity to see that the professional development, that they are receiving on a day-to-day basis,
Sure.
or, during professional development days, is really tied to the board goals, and it's tied specifically to their role and how
Sure.
they're going to help the district carry out those roles. So.
How would you, Kerry, promote transparency and community engagement in board decisions when you think about that? It seems to be important. Obviously, there's a desire for people to know what's going on, whether it's school related, city related, just in general. I think we all have access to everything at our fingertips.
Yeah.
But how would you answer that question?
Well, we kind of alluded to it a little bit. I think education is just filled with so much jargon and so many sort of like niche things that I really want to kind of help the general community that's not familiar and doesn't have that educator perspective, really kind of dissect what is it that the board does. This has been one thing that's been really interesting as I've gone through this process of running for school board. I think just educating the public about what it is that the school board does. What is it that's happening in our buildings, and how can we kind of take that and break that down in plain speak so that it's accessible for all of our families, for our entire community. I don't think anything that happens in our schools is a secret. I think sometimes it's just really hard to communicate that information in a way that is timely and accessible. And so I think just sort of working closely with our community members, listening to what they need. I think we've done a really great job in our district of building platforms where, we communicate with families about extracurricular activities and things like that. And I would like to see the board kind of shift to doing some of those same, kind of using that same model
Sure.
to share out information with our families and our communities.
Very good. We're at the halfway point, if you can believe it. And just a reminder for those watching, this is the GMCCI Advocacy Podcast, Meet the Candidates with Kerry Dalbey, who is up for your vote, potentially November 4th or beforehand, Muscatine Community School District Board of Education. And we are inside the Greater Muscatine Chamber of Commerce and Industries offices in this really cool studio space.
Yeah.
I don't think I've said that that's where we're at, but because that's another acronym, that GMCCI. And I was just thinking, I'm like, I wonder if people know that means Greater Muscatine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Our fifth question, Kerry. So what role should the school board play in shaping curriculum and educational priorities?
Yeah, so this is kind of a multi-pronged approach, and I think this is another opportunity for the board to really provide some opportunities just to gain access for our community as a whole. So school boards are not responsible for setting standards. That happens at the federal level or the state level in our case. That's currently where that's done. And so those standards are things that are non-negotiables throughout the state of Iowa. And so obviously that's our first priority, making sure that everything we do is within the bounds of the law. That's obviously our first priority. But then, beyond the standards, I think using what we know about our district, through the data that we collect, through having input from, various stakeholders in our community, and listening to the professionals that are in our buildings every day working alongside students. I think those things go hand in hand. I think beyond that, it's really a collaborative approach to taking a look at what curriculum is going to be the best fit for our students at that point. So.
Yeah. And it's been one of those things that over the last couple of years, I know the district has gone through different history, ELA, and then I believe math is the next one. So it's not a small undertaking. Yeah. And there's a lot of work associated with that. How would you plan, if elected, Kerry, to collaborate with fellow board members, administrators, and then families?
Yeah, so I think the key part there is really the families. Families are not an audience; they are partners, and I think that anything that we can do to sort of bridge that gap and bringing information to families in a way that is accessible and digestible for them, I think is going to be a game changer. Whether it's family members, whether it's board members, external stakeholders, or individuals that are in our buildings every day, I think everybody wants the same headline. Everybody wants to see student improvement or student achievement improvement. And so I think at the end of the day, just kind of making sure that every decision we're making is centered on what's best for our students, what data do we have to support the decisions that we're making. I think, as an instructional coach, that was one thing that I always tried to help individuals understand is, data is not personal. It helps us kind of identify where our story begins and where we might have some opportunities to continue that story. So.
When I worked at Hy-Vee, former boss of mine, I believe it was Matt Schweitzer, would say things just like, math is math. Like, it's usually not wrong. And sometimes you agree with the math and sometimes you don't. And I just think that's one of those things. It's like, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Like, math is not always my friend, but usually it's not wrong that
Yeah.
often either.
Very true.
Kerry, what is your vision for improving school facilities and learning environments when you think about the wide reach of the Muscatine Community School District and the various spaces and places and things that are going on? It's a large entity.
It really is. I feel like facilities is one thing that is it's a massive undertaking. And I think we have amazing facilities for our students. I think we've done a really great job over the years of increasing, how we're marketing our district. One thing that I would love to see is us kind of take a look at, whenever families are sort of determining where they're going to spend their child's educational years. That often happens pretty early in the game. And kind of once a family gets set in a community, that's kind of where they're going to stay. So I would like to see us, really look at, are we using resources equitably, throughout pre-K-12 facilities? I would love to do just an audit of our usage of facilities. Do we have opportunities, to maybe take a look at our central office and, bringing those staff members from that one location into our buildings where they're closer to our students that we serve? Would that be a way for us to best utilize our facilities? I think, as we've talked about, declining enrollment, we're going to have to look at some of those things that maybe we haven't had to look at in the past.
Sure.
We haven't had to sit down and consider those things. But I think that needs to be a priority for the board going forward.
Absolutely. We have 3 questions left. It's wild. Just
Okay.
fly. It just flies. When you start talking to somebody, it's so strange how fast
This
time
is
can
easy.
go.
This is easy. I'm passionate about
You could do
this.
it
This
all
is
day,
easy.
you
Yeah.
said. Our 8th question for Kerry is, how would you approach budgeting and financial oversight for the district? You alluded to that a little bit with the facilities piece, but school funding, state funding, it's kind of been something I've said over and over. It's just, it can be a lot to understand. But what would be your take on that, Kerry?
Yeah, so I think, again, whenever we're looking at a budget, we need to have all of the data in front of us. We need to have not only the financial piece of it, but also, how do those decisions impact our students? Where are we getting the biggest bang for our buck? And we need to ensure that, whenever we're doing things like curriculum adoption, whenever we're selecting new curriculums and things like that, we really need to look for tools that are going to help us maximize our investment in student achievement. So I think that's one of the primary pieces. I think also we need to do a really good job of, informing the community and families a little bit more about what school finance actually looks like. You kind of hit on it a little bit. School finance can be quite a bear to really wrap your mind around. And so I think the more opportunities that we can do to kind of demystify that and be transparent. If we fund it, we should see it. I feel like the more we can communicate, the easier that work becomes, because then the more the more feedback we're going to get about how our decisions are impacting our families and our students.
Yeah, and I've said this before, and for those watching, broken record. Well, there's a couple diagrams that really do a good job of outlining school public ed funding and funding pools and buckets and whatever other word you want to use, and that really helped me because it can be a lot. And, credit to anybody working in school finance. It's an undertaking, but I am a visual learner. So when I finally saw that diagram, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm not an expert by no means, but it really just helped me go, okay, I understand that, you can only use certain funds for X, Y, and Z and so on, but it is a whole thing.
It really is. And I think you mentioned that having that visual is so helpful. And I think that we have the right people in place to help, bring some transparency.
Sure.
I think it's just, it's something that we need to maybe prioritize and shed some light on.
Yeah. It's like if you can make it fun, and not that it needs to be fun, but if it became like cool
Maybe
or like
approachable,
trendy, Like, look at all these numbers, but they're presented in a way that it's not overwhelming to Tony. All right. So question 9 for you, Kerry. What is your stance on student mental health and wellness initiatives when you kind of think about where things are at and what's maybe available or things you've maybe thought of? How would you take that one?
Yeah. So, I think having that perspective of working in public education, pre-K now through college, one thing that I come away with, you can call it character education, you can call it employability skills. At the end of the day, our industry leaders are calling it ready for a full day's work. Ready to show up and be a cooperative part of a team. Ready to dive in and meet a challenge. Just have that persistence. And so I feel like, just like adults receive professional development, on how to be a better employee. I think direct instruction is where it starts, going back to that MTSS model, our multi-tiered system of supports, and kind of differentiating. I think, we also need to really have shored up clear and consistent expectations for students, and then we need to support educators in the implementation of all of those components of character education.
Yeah, it's good. Last question is here.
Okay.
Holy moly, everybody. Just want to remind everybody, GMCCI Advocacy Podcast, Meet the Candidates with Kerry Dalbey. My name is Tony Loconsole with MPW. Last question for Kerry is, how would you evaluate the effectiveness of your service on the board should you find yourself elected with the upcoming election?
Yeah. I feel like this is probably one of the most difficult questions to nail down, because as an individual board member, sometimes that feels like that could be a little daunting. But I think that we do have opportunities to gauge the board overall, and just kind of having the opportunity to sit and listen about things that I'm passionate about. I would love to see the board develop a dashboard. Where we have very clear goals. Our district goals are published. And then, just kind of rating, how are we doing on progressing towards meeting those goals? What metrics are we using to hold ourselves accountable? I would love to also do just some educational pieces for the community as a whole. And maybe, that looks like some partnerships with, for example, our Director of Finance,
Sure.
Tom Anderson,
Sure.
and just kind of demystifying some of those things. I feel like education can be so impactful in really helping us advocate that. That is one area that, if elected to the school board, I feel like, I would be happy for individuals in the community to kind of use that as, as a benchmark. How am I doing as an individual board member in terms of, just providing transparency to our community and our families as a whole?
Well, listen, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you.
I think just is something I've thought about is for those that are in office seeking reelection, or like yourself, first time looking at something. It takes a lot to do that, to put yourself out there. It's not an easy thing, and there's work. So I appreciate your making the decision to try and to be here today. And the goal for me ultimately, when the mayor asked if I would do this, was like, yeah, if we can, for folks at home, if they can watch these and get a better sense of the candidates, because sometimes it's a name on a paper or a screen and you're like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
my hope is that you have watched this, and whether you're voting ahead of time or on November 4th. And like I've said all day, I don't care who you vote for, just vote.
Yes.
I've done that since I've been
Yes.
18, and I like it. I like voting, and now I get the sticker at my polling place, which is awesome. I can almost see my polling place from here through the buildings. But yeah, and I do hope it would be great. Nothing would bring me more joy than to see like a large turnout
Yes,
for
yes.
a non-national election. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have really appreciated this, and I think you're absolutely right. This can be a big difference maker for a lot of individuals in our community that wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to kind of have this, this almost face to face, this pseudo face to face.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
if we could reach through the screen in a non-awkward way, we would. But we don't have that technology yet. But give AI time, because I'm sure it's coming. Thanks again.
Yes,
Really
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching GMCCI Advocacy Podcast, Meet the Candidates. And without a doubt, we'll be back. And we hope that you'll continue watching. And don't forget, November 4th, Election Day in Muscatine. Head to the polls, or you can do so ahead of time. Make sure you got all the things you need in your polling locations. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.